What up, guys? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 7, a now regular podcast, YouTube video, web series thing. I'm joined today by Corbett. How are you doing tonight, friend?
Hey, what's up, man? I'm doing really good. Been enjoying the new expansion and diving into everything, and yeah, ready to talk it out.
So for those of you guys that are new or might not have watched in a while, just a reminder that we plan on doing 3 things during today's episode. First off, we're going to talk about the state of the wild meta, so what's dominating, how to beat it, and decks that might be flying underneath the radar. Second off, we're going to be talking about any wild news, controversial topics, or maybe the lack thereof. And last but not least, we'll be talking about our decks of the week. So Corbett, are you enjoying the new expansion?
It's like new cards. I like new expansions. I like toying with new stuff. I'm like a little kid. Just needs that new toy.
All
And
the
so
new toys,
yeah,
all 135 of them.
exactly. Yo, it's a lot. Yeah. But no, I have been enjoying it. Been playing a lot. Been streaming a lot, and we'll continue to do so. What about you?
Yeah, there have been a lot of like really powerful cards and a ton of like super unique cards, right? So there's this like weird mix that Wild doesn't normally benefit from, but it's having a pretty massive impact on Wild, and I'm super excited with a lot of the decks that I've been playing. But before we get started too deeply on this Wild metagame, just a reminder to like, comment, subscribe if you guys enjoy content like this. The State of the Wild with Corbett will be coming out every Sunday. So if you guys, like this content, you might want to hit that little notification bell so you guys know when these videos go live. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the Wild meta. So it's only been 3 days, right? Totally enough time to talk about the meta, even though it's still in flux. So we've both been bouncing around top 150 legends. And so what seems super strong? What's standing out to you in the early days of the metagame?
The meta looks very, very different, and I think that the number one deck that is the defining thing right now is Reno Priest.
Yeah.
Reno Priest looks so busted from what I've seen and felt so far. There are a couple other good decks, such as I think Big Shaman looks really good as well. But right now it's really Anduin's playground.
Yeah, it's a lot of priest. At least in top 100 legends. So this is obviously not speaking about the entire ladder experience. Tons of Arena Priest, tons of Kingsbane Rogue. Kingsbane Rogue's made a massive comeback. I think super popular because people are excited that it's back. I'm not 100% certain about the power level of that yet. Been seeing a lot of combo Druid, both the Miracle OTK, some Malygos Druid, some Togwaggle Druid, and then a lot of Quest Mage still, as people like, still on this hype train of this previously OP deck from 4 days ago. So we're on board this Reno Priest train. What have seemed like some of the most powerful cards that we've seen, right? I'm assuming Mindbender or Mindrender or Lucia is somewhat in that camp, right?
Yeah, I think Mind Render is having pretty much like the biggest impact on the format and will have the biggest impact going forward. Insanely powerful card, and obviously flips matchups for Reno Priest like entirely by itself, has a huge impact on these combo matchups. Other cards that look really strong, I would say like Secret Passage is hard to ignore. Reader, the Voracious Reader looks really good as well. So yeah, those are some of the standouts. Oh, and Lightning Bloom. Had to forget that one, which is impacting Big Shaman and Mally. Turns out Innovate still good in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for a bunch of cards that are not like in those top tier decks, but stuff like Devout People has like lived up to the hype. For myself, I've been super excited with Guardian Animals, the Druid and Hunter card. I thought that was going to be super like meh in Wild, just because minion combat doesn't really exist. Like fair minion combat doesn't really exist. Turns out Guardian Animals is not a very fair card when it's coming out on turn 3, turn 4. So those have been kind of the big ones. I kind of a little bit of a surprise question, not in the notes, but what are some of the cards that you thought were going to be strong that might not have been as strong, or maybe some controversial cards?
Some cards that I thought were going to be strong. I'm trying to think about what I hit on as my like top 5 most powerful cards. I think like in general, the Dark Lair package, I know like Dark Lair itself isn't actually from the new set, but I thought the Dark Lair package might have been a bit better. And maybe it does have potential, but I wasn't really super satisfied with the theory crafting. Raised Dead is really strong though. So yeah, I'm trying to think of like the new cards as a whole. But what about you? That's a surprise question.
I was gonna talk about this. I was like super hype on like Flesh Giant and Brittlebone Destroyer, and I was like, oh well, Raised Dead's kind of like the 29th and 30 cards in those deck. It turns out that Raised Dead's like one of the best cards in all the decks that it's in, right? So we'll talk about a bunch of Warlock decks today, where like Raise Dead is one of the focal pieces of that deck, and it's really good in Even Lock, and it's really good in certain Priest decks, and I've yet to test it in like Cube Lock and Reno Lock, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was insanely good in those decks. Um,
Right. Yeah.
but I'm actually a little bit surprised on the lack of Demon Hunter that I've been seeing on ladder. I felt like with True Aim Crescent and Ace Hunter Crane and Mage Hunter, that like odd Demon Hunter would be getting kind of a huge boost. And maybe that's just because we've been in fairly high legend and there's a ton of priests which are maybe pushing the Demon Hunters out, but I've been really surprised by the lack of kind of testing or at least presence on ladder of Demon
Mhm.
Hunter.
Well, Demon was a deck that I remember, like, as the expansion like wound down, I had a really big problem trying to fit in the last like 6 cards. Like, wasn't satisfied with anything, and then the same thing happened when I was theory crafting. It felt like the weapon was fine, and then Mage Hunter I wasn't super high on. And so I actually wasn't that hyped on Demon Hunter heading to the expansion. I think it might still be solid-ish, but yeah, this is actually about what I expected to happen with the class. I didn't think it actually got that many new tools.
Well, I
Um,
was in the same boat, right? Where there was like I was like iffy on like the last 5 or 6 cards, and so I saw these like
mhm.
like these 3 cards, really, and I was like, ah, well, that kind of solves my issue, right? Where it's solving that
Yeah.
problem with the last 5 or 6 cards that I wanted in Demon Hunter, and so I thought it would be a lot stronger, or at least
Mhm.
along those lines. But I've been surprised that it's not seeing any play at all, honestly.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so we've talked about Rena Priest. You want to dive? Let's revisit this. Let's dive in. So I think would you be fair to say that Rena Priest is the best deck in day three of the metagame?
That would be my pick. Yeah, if I was to give one. I think there are two. I think there are two very good decks that look a lot better than the rest. I think Reno Priest is the best, and Big Shaman is also really strong. Um, but Reno Priest as a whole feels like a deck that is going to be the most dominant moving forward. It feels very difficult for the meta to handle as a whole.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. So targeting Rena Priest. If Rena Priest has its target painted on its back, what can the listeners potentially look to play or include in their decks to try to help that matchup a little bit? I don't know if there is anything out there because nothing's immediately springing to mind, but
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, Reno Priest previously only ever lost to one archetype, which was like combo decks that were faster than it,
yeah.
right? So that was things like Mechathun Warlock or Mali Druid or Quest Mage. Um, and it had such dominant matchups over a lot of the aggressive decks. So with Mind Render itself is able to flip some of this around pretty heavily, and it makes it really tough for it to counter. I think Malygos Druid and Quest Mage is still favored over it, but whether it's worth playing Quest Mage as a whole, and whether it's a quote unquote like viable counter. It's the same thing where like Snip Snap theoretically lost to Freeze Mage or Exodia Mage, but you're never actually going to play Exodia Mage
Yeah,
on
on
ladder
ladder, yeah.
because the whole sucks. So yeah, I think like Malygos Druid looks like the most viable best answer right now. But you know, we'll see. It's a very very strong deck and very hard to target.
Well, like, what about Big Shaman, right? You mentioned that this is the second best deck in the format. I mean, I know Priest has, like, the best removal tools of all the other 9 classes, like, put together. But do you think Big Shaman, if it cheats out its minions early enough, turn 2, turn 3, do you think it has a real chance at beating Rena Priest?
I think that Big Shaman previously lost to Reno Priest. It was the worst matchup for Big Shaman, actually, at about like a 60-40 kind of thing. And I think that while the speed of getting out your minions definitely helps the matchup a lot, I don't think it's enough to make it a counter by any means. I think at best, it might be a slight favorable. And the Priest can also tech their list pretty heavily to improve that with things like Max the Spell and Silence if they need to. So yeah, I don't know about that one either.
Yeah, so basically what I'm hearing from Corbett here is Rena Priest, current king of the metagame, and it's up to all of us to figure out some way, right? I'm sure there's some genius out there that's listening to this that's going to figure out some deck or some tech cards that are going to help that matchup. So yeah, so let's move on. Instead of moving on to part two and talking about the wild news, since we just had an expansion, I think we're just going to go ahead and skip over that because there's not really much to talk about in terms of news, and just kind of hop on over to part three, our favorite decks of the expansion. So here's where we talk about our decks of the week, and normally we do three, right? One top tier deck, one kind of under the radar deck, and one off-meta choice. But given that we're recording this episode 3 days after the expansion launched, we felt like it might be kind of awesome to just share a whole selection of decks that we've been playing utilizing some of the new cards. And so don't worry, we've got decks for all kinds of players, whether you're super try hard or looking to have a little bit of fun. But Corbett, you want to go ahead and take it away with the first deck?
Sure. So let's jump into the Mali Druid that we were just talking about. NHL fan recently just hit rank 1 legend with an insane win rate with Mali Druid. The deck has picked up the Bloom as the Innovate, which really helps how consistently you can execute the combo and how early you can cheat it out. Yeah. Studies is also a really nice card for the deck to pick up. So yeah, Mali Druid just got, it was a solid deck, and it just got some like really important tools into the expansion, and it looks like, even though I think it's like a good deck right now, but it's very important because it does look like one of the better priest counters moving forward. So yeah, might be worth playing this one for sure.
And the next up, we're going to talk about Guardian Animals Druids. So you could totally take this a standard-esque route with Kael'thas and Ysera and Survival of the Fittest, but I kind of decided to take it a little bit more of a fun route. And so this might not be the most competitive version of this deck, and I am totally going to revisit this deck in the future, assuming Kael'thas and Survival of the Fittest don't get nerfed in the next couple of weeks, but and revisit this style of deck. But fingers crossed. Yeah. So Guardian Animals is a really cool card in Wild, right? It's a pretty unique card. But yeah, so this is all about your traditional Guardian Animals mid game with the beast that's just kind of bonkers, and it transitions into like a taunt druid hybrid in the late game, which I think is it's like a really fun, unique take to the deck because we get to add Witchwood Grizzly to the deck compared to standard, and pulling a 3/12 taunt off of Guardian Animals is kind of bonkers. And yeah, so Guardian Animals, tons of fun. Definitely not the most refined version, but I will be revisiting it. And then next up, I want to talk about my Pure Paladin deck that I played. And so I actually played this to actually rank 31 Legend. So it was super competitive into almost everything that wasn't Priest. And you could actually still have a surface level matchup into Priest, given that you were super aggressive. And so the only new card in this deck, only new cards, I guess I should say, Devout People, which we talked about earlier, just a really, really solid, like, Thing from Below-esque card. And then High Abyss Allura, which was not something I had in, like, the original Theorycraft, but after I opened it in Golden from, like, the pre-order, I had to, like, try it in here, and it was, like, surprisingly really, really good. So yeah, even casting, like, a Christology, right, which is, like, the low roll, it's still fine because you're drawing 2 cards from your deck, right? But like the dream of hitting a Libram of Hope or a Spike-Ridge Steed on it is super juicy, and I'm really excited about Pure Paladin. And actually, I thought it was going to be a hardcore meme, but it actually looks pretty damn competitive. It's a pretty solid anti-aggressive deck. The problem with this is going to be the combo druids and the Reno Priest for sure.
Yeah, Pure Paladin, like one of the best decks in Standard. And I know like Wild, Standard, different formats, but generally speaking, if it's like really, really good in Standard, it means it's viable. If it's got like, can pick up some pieces, it's like viable in Wild. And I think Pure Paladin was like already good-ish before the expansion, and it picked up some really good stuff. Allura is really good.
Yeah, I totally slept on Allura, and I'm sure that there's like even more broken combos you can do with her. I'm thinking like Murloc Paladin that I haven't touched yet with Tip the Scales. I'm sure there's something.
Okay, so next let's jump into Reno Priest. Reno Priest is a deck that obviously got some huge boosts in the expansion. Mind Render being the most obvious one, but also got like Polkad, the card that shuffles your deck in order of cost, allows you to pick up the Anduin, and then the Raza very, very quickly, or the Reno in more aggressive matchups. Yeah, Reno Priest, people have moved away from the Dragon build in the early days. I'm not sure whether that'll revert. I've personally Theorycraft and been playing as well a little bit of Dragons myself. But yeah, Reno Priest looks incredibly strong and dominant, and I think it's the best deck, and I don't necessarily see that changing, but it is early, so we'll see. But yeah, definitely give it a shot.
So if you think Reno Priest is going to be super popular, do you ever think that we might see a shift? So back in the day when Reno Priest was originally dominant, we saw these auctioneer super turbo cycle lists. Sorry. And I'm interested to see if that ever potentially sees play, because you poke it, then you draw your auctioneer like on 6, on 7, and then you have a couple spells to combo off with. I'd be interested to see how these lists develop as the meta game swaps to target it,
Mhm.
or it starts to
Yeah,
target itself. You know.
yeah, Auctioneer was previously a really good mirror choice. I think Polket might negate some of that, some of the advantage that you get.
Yeah.
Because if either player gets the Polket, they kind of just like, they don't need to dig through their deck very much. It's like the cards are on top of their deck.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it'll actually move away from that, or you just have to keep on putting in maybe more combo disruption, more anti-aggro, and it'll just be more of the same, I think.
Yeah, I will say, like, I've played a lot, so the version on the left is the one that I've been running. I have found that when you poke it on 4, I sometimes end up in this really weird situation where, like, I have Raza spawn on 9, but I don't have enough
Don't have the
gas
damage.
to deal the
Yeah.
damage. Yeah, so I'm sitting here, I'm like, maybe poke it on 4 is, like, maybe not
A little
the
bit of a
move.
bait.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
poke it on 4 is
I
a
think
little bait.
I think it definitely just depends on the matchup, depends on the context. Sometimes you might want to do it, but you don't have to. Like, yeah. Okay. Next up, let's talk about Odd Rogue. Now, Odd Rogue is the deck that I personally have had the most success with and probably the most fun with so far. I love this Odd Rogue so much. This Odd Rogue is the same one I theorycrafted before the expansion. It's so aggressive, running so much more card draw and burst compared to previous builds of Odd Rogue. It picks up things like Cutting Class, the the Toxin Blade. It's running a whole bunch of this more aggressive stuff, Secret Passage, and it feels really great. So yeah, Odd Rogue feels very, very strong right now. I think it's among the better decks in the format, and definitely a lot of fun. I've really liked it. Jandis is a card that I keep on getting questions about, like, oh, is Jandis good?
I was
Jandis
about
looks
to ask
bad.
you that, yeah.
Yeah, is Jandis the meme? No, I really like Jandis. I think
Really?
Jandis is strong.
Okay.
Yeah, like really good. The thing about Jandis is that if you're a deck that can consistently stay ahead on board, when you vomit out this ridiculous amount of stats, like you're often developing about like 10 power. It's very hard for the opponent to deal with if you're ahead. And it's just a very aggressive card. And picking up random death rattles is also huge. So yeah, I really like this list, and I'll keep playing it. I'm actually peaked at. I'm currently ranked 6 legend, I think, at the time of recording this. And yeah, with Odd Rogue, yeah. So it's been going really well.
Okay. I mean, I guess Janus makes a lot of sense if you're queuing into a lot of priests, right? Because it's not like they have very easy ways to ping it, for example, right, to kill off your minions. So I can totally see that. How's the Krastenov been treating you? That's something that was like super.
Yeah.
Like if it was gonna find a home in Wild, I thought Odd Rogue was probably where it was gonna see play. But how's it been treating you?
Liked it a lot. Yeah. It feels like with things like Deadly Poison, it just gives you a bit more freedom to kind of Deadly Poison and have like the 1 health, the 1 durability left, right? And it's like it's kind of like a Faceless Corruptor that lets you also push a bit more face damage. So yeah, I've really liked it so far. It definitely is a big upgrade over something like Greenskin. And yeah, I really like this list as a whole. I think the only questionable cards are maybe the South Sea Captains, but it feels very clean. I've really enjoyed it. Another Rogue deck then. Let's talk about Kingsbane Rogue. Kingsbane Rogue has gotten a huge boost with the expansion, and is seeing a massive increase in popularity. And this is the most common build that people are playing, a build from Kohai that really took a very creative approach in cutting things like Ship's Cannon and Brigand, and going
you
for
thought were uncuttable, he's cut.
You know? Yes, the uncuttable pirate package. And yeah, so Kohai hit really high ranks. I think Heijo as well hit rank 1 legend with this list, or something very close to this. And yeah, Kingsbane looks really good. I think there's still a bit of room for refinement with the deck. I think in the early days, so far, it's limited sample, but it looks like the Edwin coins might not look like the best cards, and maybe Ship's Cannon is worth revisiting. But yeah, Kingsbane definitely looks like something that can stick around. The aggressive openers and the amount of card draw you have is really nutty. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun with this deck as well.
Dude, the amount of card draw, I feel like it's turn 5, turn 6, and Kingsbane has consistently seen every card in their deck. And
it's like a discard warlock.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
And a completely different style of killing you, which is cool.
Yeah.
Do you think Kingsbane has staying power? Let me go ahead and pose that question. We touched on it a little bit, but do you think Kingsbane is here to stay if Secret Passage, assuming, doesn't get nerfed?
I think it is here to stay for a bit, yeah. I think once the build gets figured out, it's hard to say that it won't be at least competitive. I think it's very, very strong.
Yeah, I remember, didn't Kingsbane used to have like the super strong matchup into Reno Priest back in the day? I guess before Mindrender or Lucy, obviously. So like now it can steal your Kingsman, I suppose. But
Yeah, it's definitely a card that you have to be really cognizant of when playing that matchup. You can't really strand your Kingsman unless you like don't have a choice. Um,
yeah,
but I think like the Zephyrus also makes a bit of a difference where they have like very easy weapon removal now, and they
yeah.
have a lot more. It feels like they have a lot more ability to kind of deal with the board, and kind of like take tempo away from you. But yeah, I think that previously it was a pretty good matchup for the Kingsbane. So we'll see. Maybe that's just actually a good counter right there.
Yeah, so keep an eye on this deck and Druid, right? As the potential to the Reno Priest. Okay, so moving on. This is the deck. I'm gonna show it on screen, and I want you to just take a look at it. Pause the video, take a look at this before I start talking about it, because if you take a look at this deck, you're gonna be like, "What the hell are you playing in Top 100 Legend? You're trolling." This deck. So the idea of this came from KookieBots on Twitter, and this deck revolves around three cards. It's Disciplinary and Gambling and Hobgoblins, right? And the whole idea behind this deck is you tap in the early game, right, with the Tour Guide, Cobalt Librarians, and your Hero Power, draw a bunch of cards, and then you just literally vomit huge amounts of stats utilizing Hobgoblins and all the zero cost cards you have access to now. And then with stuff like Broomstick and Grim Rally, you kind of manipulate your board state and you just do obscene amounts of damage super early in the game. It's got some hit and miss potential because if you don't, like, you're essentially hard mulliganing for those three cards, and if you don't hit them, the game plans get a little bit iffy. But this deck is a crap ton of fun to play. Like I've streamed for about 17 hours in the past 3 days, and I have spent about or five of them playing this one deck. It's so much fun to play.
Yeah, I saw this deck for the first time just yesterday. And I was so excited watching it. This looks amazing. I think I'm definitely going to give it a shot myself. Yeah, it looks really, really fun and surprisingly competitive. Like it looked good from what I saw.
I had a positive matchup against every class in Top 100 Legend that wasn't Reno Priest, right? And even Reno Priest, I was holding close to a 50% win rate, which was like that's kind of nutty. Like, which is for as memey as this deck looks, I legitimately think this has like insane amounts of potential. I think the worst cards in this deck are the Voidwalkers. And I'm not really sure what to cut them for. I know we talked a little bit about Soulfire, but you want as many minions as possible for the Gambling Vomit. But yeah, Kookie has done it again with these wacky decks that, with a little bit of refinement, look like they have the potential to be super competitive.
And I think Cute Lock is probably the best Hearthstone deck name that I've heard in a long time.
I mean, look, you're running Desk Imp, Murloc Tiny Fin, and Snow Flipper Penguins. Like, if your opponents don't concede when they kill a Tiny Imp, they have no soul. So, all right. So moving on, we've got a couple decks left to talk about. Let's talk about Evenlock. So Evenlock has also been seeing like a huge kind of rise in popularity with a lot of people playing it, thanks to the package we were talking about earlier with Brittlebone Destroyers, Flesh Giants, and Raised Deads. So we've got a couple lists over here from me and Rotted Zombie. Completely different takes. So I think mine is more geared towards Priest, anti-Priest, with as many threats as possible, trying to... Priest will eventually run out of removal, right? Fingers crossed. Whereas Rotted's looks like a more anti-aggressive build with the Nether Breaths and the Double Hellfire and the Hotheads, the new dragons. But yeah, I mean, Evenlock has always historically been a very, very good anti-aggressive deck, even with the change to how Devolve works. But I will say, if Priest is super popular, that's always been one of Evenlock's worst matchups. So I don't know, don't really know how popular this is going to be. But Mali Druids have been cutting poison seeds, right? So Giants plus Zihis are going to pop off against Druid. It has a pretty good matchup against Kingsman because a lot of them are not running Saps at the moment. So, depending on what you're seeing in your metagame, I think Evenlock has the potential to be a very good deck.
Yeah, you can also tech in like Nerubian Unravelers. That could be a way to go if the meta becomes very Priest and Druid based.
Yeah, the 6 mana 5/5s make your opponent's spells cost a lot more. But yeah, I mean, Evenlock, not a ton to talk about. I think there's still a lot of refinement to go. I think most of the lists that I've seen are kind of split on this. No dragons versus dragons with Nether Breath. It's kind of hard to tell, and I think it's very meta dependent on what
Sure.
might be the so-called optimal build. And last but not least, let's talk a little bit about this Darkler Warlock. I know you were a little bit disappointed in kind of the performance of it, um, but I even saw Jonah Raw playing a version of this deck running Magic Carpets. Um, but this is a list that I had kind of messed around with. I just kind of took out the discard package just because it was clogging up the board a lot, and
Hmm.
uh, I put back in the Molten Giants, and I think this deck, if it's going to be good, is going to be good in a meta where there's not a lot of aggro because they can't punish you for dealing 25 damage to yourself. Right? I had a
Yeah.
game where by turn 4 I was on like 8 HP, all because of damage I took myself. So, um, what do you think this deck needs? Like, what it? I feel like is missing a solid win con. I think just vomiting
Hey,
Hooked Reavers, Void Drinkers, and Giants isn't really enough of a win con when Priest is super
I think what it needs is 4 copies of Dark Lair. Like when I
meta.
tried to build, the thing is like the deck felt like it definitely had potential. Like when it did the powerful thing, it was very, very powerful.
Yeah.
But it felt like centering the entire deck around Dark Lair wasn't consistent enough, it felt like.
It doesn't
And
have all
so
win cons, you think?
no, yeah. So I think like maybe the best home for Dark Lair and Raised Dead is maybe you just played in Discard Warlock, like normal Discard Warlock with the Flame Imp Librarian,
Boring.
and you just
Yeah.
yeah, I know it's not as exciting as what we theorycrafted and stuff, but
Yeah.
I think that might just be the best home for it, all things considered, because you can actually like just use your normal discard stuff. And Raised Dead is like a very, very powerful standalone card. The Flame Imp and Librarian have already been played. And so, yeah, maybe the whole package, maybe it just goes to the already established deck. But yeah, it definitely felt like it had potential and upside. And so, yeah, might have to find a home there.
Yeah. I'm waiting for a card that says it's like a 3 mana 0/5 or 0 mana 1/1 that gains stats for as much damage as you've
It's
dealt to yourself. Some sort of insane win condition
some like questing adventurer esque
style
for yeah,
card.
how
Yeah.
self damage. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed a lot of the list and a little bit of the analysis that we brought to you guys during today's episode. Just a reminder that we're going to be doing these episodes every week with news and decks every episode. Corbett, thank you for joining me again today. Let the people know where they can find you.
Guys, you can find me at CorbettGames on Twitch or Twitter. You can also check out my YouTube channel, all that stuff at this CorbettGames. I'll be streaming every night, very early morning for the US people. And yeah, so check that out. Really looking forward to keep diving into the expansion. But yeah, thanks for having me again, Meowth. This has been a really fun thing that we've been doing. So yeah.
Yeah. If you guys don't watch his stream, at least head over there and drop a follow so that you guys can watch his VOD. He's an awesome streamer and a very, very good player. And you can learn a few things because I know I do. And if I'm doing it, I'm sure a lot of you guys can too. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you guys did, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you guys next time. Later.
Bye, guys.